This is the Ethanol Report, the industry podcast from the Renewable Fuels Association since 2008. I'm Cindy Zimmerman. Back to our roots was the theme for the 30th National Ethanol Conference in Nashville this past week. Renewable Fuels Association President and CEO Jeff Cooper says it was one of the most well-attended conferences they've had in many years.
We have a huge crowd here this year. I think this is the largest group of attendees we've had in 8 or 9 years. And I think it just reflects the growing interest in what's happening in the ethanol industry. You know, I think it reflects the growing interest in trying to gain some insight and some answers into what changes in the administration are going to mean for the industry. I will say I think there's a lot of optimism in the industry, a lot of optimism we're hearing from attendees about the opportunities that are ahead of us, even with a lot of uncertainty right now, a lot of uncertainty around the regulatory environment moving forward. We've got, RFS rules that we're waiting on. We've got the E15 situation. We've got 45Z hanging out there. But I think at the end of the day, the industry remains very optimistic and positive about the outlook.
In his annual State of the Ethanol Industry address, Cooper highlighted the industry's pivotal role in American agriculture and outlined how ethanol can once again help the farm sector thrive in the face of current economic challenges if the right actions are taken by Congress and the administration. That includes protecting and expanding the renewable fuel standard, revisiting tailpipe emission standards, and bringing more certainty and stability to biofuel tax credits and trade policies.
Congress and the administration have a lot to sort out when it comes to our nation's tax policy, and that includes the future and fate of these IRA tax credits. And if there's one thing we know, it's that markets hate uncertainty. Maybe I should rephrase that. Markets absolutely despise uncertainty. But realistically, it may be a while before we have the answers we need on 45Z. And that's why, in the meantime, RFA believes Congress should strongly consider reinstating the suite of biofuel tax incentives that expired in December, including the second-generation biofuel producer tax credit. Temporarily bringing those credits back would provide a bridge to 45Z and give the industry more certainty.
Ethanol champion Republican Congressman Randy Feenstra of Iowa joined Cooper on stage at the conference to talk about the future of the Inflation Reduction Act and the clean fuel production tax credit included in it, known as 45Z.
You've been one of the leaders in Congress when it comes to advocating for not only preserving that tax credit, but potentially improving it and potentially expanding it, because a 3-year lifespan, which we're already, a couple months into, just isn't a whole lot. So can you talk about your perspective on the 45Z credit, its importance, and some of the work you've been doing there?
Yeah. So first of all, we have to go back to what what did Trump say? Trump said we want to be energy independent. So how do we start looking at energy independence, right? It starts with growing our own energy, right? Ethanol. How do we do that? Well, that's where 45Z comes in. That's number one. Number two is we have all our producers. How can we help produce and make sure our producers are getting paid for what they're doing, for better environmental production and so forth, and making sure that we're not just using a supplemental like we did last year. And last year we passed a bill for $12 billion to give farmers to help them out. We don't want that. We don't want supplementals. We want to make sure that we have a place to go with our corn and soybeans, and that's where we have a 45Z and what it will do to grow our economy, what it will do to grow where our corn and soybeans go. And we're all fearful, right? We're all fearful of, okay, what happens with tariffs? Where does this all go? Well, if we have 45Z, we have an opportunity to absorb some of the issues that might happen with tariffs.
Meanwhile, nationwide year-round E15 remains the ethanol industry's top priority, and Congressman Feenstra expressed optimism that it could be included in the next continuing resolution after getting so close in the December CR.
Well, what we did is we said we were going to do a clean CR till March 15. So now we're back at the table again. March 15 is less than a month away, and we've got to pass a continuing resolution, or we've got to pass a budget for 2025. That's how behind we are. So we're back at the table saying, all right, Speaker, and I had dinner with him last week, saying this is one thing that we've got to include in this CR. And he just patted me on the back and goes, Randy, I heard you in December and I hear you now. It's like, all right, but we didn't get it done in December, so we got to get it done now. So, we're, again, optimistic. I'm also optimistic, but we want it codified. We don't want executive order is nice, I get it, but we really want it codified. We want it in law. And I really believe here in the next several months that this is going to happen. And really, there's really no pushback. I mean, there's just not a tremendous amount of pushback on this. So that to me makes it really easy to get it done. But we got to get it done. And with that, the U.S. Senate is really with us too. I mean, I've been working with Senator Fisher and others. Obviously, Senator Thune, very close friend. We're all working together to make it happen in March.
Some good justification for E15 can be found in RFA's latest Economic Impact Report, which Chief Economist Scott Richmond says shows just how much ethanol helps farmers and the rural economy.
2024 was another very good year following on the heels of 2023. In terms of economic impact, we contributed over $50 billion to GDP. We generated over $25 billion in income and supported more than 300,000 jobs. More than half of the impact as far as GDP and income were in agriculture, and more than two-thirds of the jobs. So in terms of helping out in what was a somewhat challenging year for growers, ethanol came through again.
The winner of this year's RFA Industry Award was Rick Schwark, co-founder and recently retired CEO of Absolute Energy, and he pointed out just how vitally important the ethanol industry is to farmers and how important higher ethanol blends are to their future.
If you're a farmer or rancher, please stand. All right. I accept this award on behalf of every one of you because you are the root of the RFA. Thank you. You've heard this all week. I've got a different acronym for the RFA. They are the Remarkable Farmer Advocate. Everything they do is about the farmer first. I want to change one little vernacular here. We've heard a lot about E15. It's E15 plus. E15 is just the beginning. It is not the end.
Carol King, a farmer and chairman of Southwest Iowa Renewable Energy, or SIRE, participated in the Back to Our Roots panel at the NEC to discuss the beginnings of the industry and what they see for the future. And for him, the future is higher blends.
I think E15 is the first step, but beyond that, we got to start looking at the next one is E20, E30. We sat on E10 too long, and it's not that we haven't been trying to go to E15, but we just got to keep pushing and find other avenues to get it done. Blender pups will make a lot of difference. We can just start doing it then.
While domestic demand is always important, international demand for U.S. ethanol hit a record high last year of 1.9 billion gallons in exports. But there are questions about how President Trump's tariff policies might impact that growth in the future. Everett Eisenstadt, a renowned global trade expert who has served in congressional and administration offices, says while there is still a lot of uncertainty, Trump's policies could be beneficial for ethanol in some markets.
Now, this focus on reciprocity, it may not be all to your detriment. In fact, there are a lot of markets like Brazil, and he actually cited Brazil in the fact sheet on reciprocal trade as a country that has a very unfair tariff barrier on U.S. ethanol. We have a 2.5% barrier tariff. They've got an 18% tariff, which really has crushed the industry in Brazil. There's also the tariffs that are, the retaliatory tariffs in China, so maybe there could be some negotiations, open that market up as well. Now, to get from here to there, from here to the end of a negotiation, if he puts tariffs in place, there will be retaliation. I am convinced of that. And so that could impact your ethanol and distilled grain exports to other markets. Retaliatory tariffs could impact the price of commodities, farm products, making them less competitive in global markets, potentially shrinking their market access, reducing demands, potentially impacting prices for those products. That may impact your industry as well. So there's a lot of moving pieces here, and we're only 4, maybe 5 weeks into the first administration of a 4-year agenda. So it's a very, very volatile environment. The landscape is unpredictable. The details of how and when he'll implement the tariff threats are unclear. But you have to be prepared to navigate the increasingly unpredictable and complicated trade landscape.
U.S. Grains Council President and CEO Ryan LeGrand talked about the great potential for U.S. exports of ethanol and distillers' grains, and said the Grains Council is even considering a name change to reflect that importance.
Ethanol for the last 11 years has really taken an ever-increasing role in our daily activities. Today, ethanol market development makes up about 35% of our total budget. And for the last couple of years, I've been saying that ethanol is part of our identity and practice, but not in name. Which is why we have just recently asked our membership to consider an amendment to our organizational name to become the U.S. Grains and Bioproducts Council, to include ethanol, all of the products that are coming out. That's distillers' grains, that's future SAF feedstock. We want to make sure that that's included in the name and it's known who we are and what we represent. So they'll be voting on that on August 1st.
Sustainable aviation fuel was another big topic of discussion at the National Ethanol Conference, with a panel on the use of ethanol in both aviation and heavy-duty equipment. Tim Hughes, with the Commercial Aviation Alternative Fuels Initiative, summed up the current opportunity versus challenges situation for renewable fuels in SAF.
I think the opportunities for the sustainable aviation fuel or alternative fuels for aviation sector are enormous. There's a lot of uncertainty here in the United States today on what is going to be the focus of the current federal administration. And depending on who you talk to, many people are optimistic. There's still, I think, an opportunity to promote renewable fuels as all the above, a way of increasing our energy security here domestically, a way of creating opportunities for rural communities, a way of addressing long-term environmental concerns. A recent study came out showing just the impact of using traditional jet fuel in the aviation sector at the airports and how that impacts a city. And so, if we can show that industry how renewable fuels are meeting a multitude of benefits, I believe that we will find legislative support on the federal side. Internationally, Europe, Asia, many other countries have already put the stake in the ground and have mandates in place. And so, as I showed, UPS, DHL, FedEx, many of these companies that have the international footprint have to meet those objectives. And so whether we slow the progress down or hinder it here in the United States, there is an opportunity globally, and I think there's a great place for agriculture, renewable fuels, and specifically ethanol to play a part in meeting that demand.
The future of electric vehicles was the topic of yet another panel, which was moderated by RFA's Robert White, who asked Andy Koblenz with the National Automobile Dealers Association what might happen with the EPA's tailpipe emissions rule that mandates the switch to EVs.
The alligator that's closest to the boat right now for the OEMs and for the industry, auto industry, is the California rules. There was a significant development there. There are basically 5 paths for us to eliminate the California entitlement to regulate under the Clean Air Act. The litigation is absolutely one of them, and that one will continue. Courts are notoriously inefficient time-wise for getting things done, but that one will continue. All of these are going to be tried. Secondly, the EPA could reverse the regulation, but that would also be subject to litigation if it comes. You could get the states to try to withdraw it. The fourth one is a statutory change, just passing a change and amendment to the Clean Air Act. That takes 60 votes in the Senate. And then we get to the fifth one, which is the one that I think is the most likely to move, which is that whether to use the Congressional Review Act to overturn the granting of the preemption waiver that California got in December. This it's coming. There's an issue as to whether or not that waiver grant was a quote-unquote rule for purposes of the Congressional Review Act, but the General Accounting Office has said that if the agency decides to send it to Congress, as they're required to under the Congressional Review Act, and makes the decision that it is a rule, the General Accounting Office will not opine to the contrary, and they are the arbiters for the Congress of the rule. They'll leave it up to Congress to decide.
The optimism of ethanol producers and farmers who attended the NEC this year was obvious, and RFA's Senior Vice President for Government and Public Affairs, Troy Bradenkamp, believes there's good energy towards ethanol in Washington, D.C. right now as well.
I think the Trump administration is setting the tone. You saw in his national emergency executive order, he mentioned E15 in that initial executive order. He's mentioned it again several times, that biofuels needs to play a role in this energy dominance portfolio that they're pursuing. So I think we're well positioned, and I think the exercise from last December indicated to congressional leadership there's not a lot of opposition out there for E15. I think there was expectation that E15 was going to run up against some real hurdles with what they were trying to get done. You had 2 or 3 people whining, complaining, but it wasn't 30. And so that was, I think, a real eye-opener for congressional leadership, and I think that's why they're going to be on board with us getting it done as soon as we can. The other stuff that's happening is it's hard to keep up with what's happening at the White House right now. So, there's an executive order almost every hour, so it's just hard to keep up with that pace. But that's everybody right now trying to digest what's happening at a just breakneck speed. Just haven't seen it in 4 to 6 years. So it's exciting, but you got to be on your toes out there.
So the 30th NEC is in the history books now, and next year the conference will be in Orlando. Hopefully it'll be warmer there, since we did get a few inches of snow in Nashville, and it was pretty cold, but no one seemed to mind very much. And that's the Ethanol Report for this time. Thanks for listening.